Good morning, everybody, and thank you for hopping on our call. As always, I'm going to be reading out the numbers, and today we have the privilege of having Conrad Pawlowski help us out with, what carrier and why. But I'm going to read the numbers real quick, and then we're going to let Conrad get started on that. So this week we had 12 writers, 38 apps, equaling $45,136. We had Nadia, had one app at $105. Charles, 2 apps for $694. We had Chris, 1 app, $756. Joe, 1 app, $960. Jennifer had 2 apps, $1,212. Claudia, 2 apps, $1,694. Julie had 4 apps, $2,563. Latuan had 3 apps, $2,564. We had Dawn, 6 apps, $7,188. Dawn, you're being very consistent. It's awesome. Lori, welcome back. She had 2 apps, $7,517. Myself, 6 apps, $8,980. And we had Paige topping off the leaderboard with 8 apps, $10,903, plus a $40K annuity. Way to go, Paige. So this week, guys, I know we have a lot of new agents starting, plus we have some people that have been around a little bit but maybe still don't know exactly why we choose what carrier. So we have the privilege of having Conrad, who has been a go-to for me on, hey, Conrad, have you ever had this situation? Who do you what carrier do you pick? So I have you there, Conrad?
Yeah, I'm here, Chantal. Thank you for having me on. I don't take it lightly that I'm able to give back, and so I can help. I'm glad to help out in any way.
Well, you've been awesome in this area, Conrad, so you were the first person that came to my mind. So I appreciate you taking time out of your day to help us out.
Yeah, anytime. I appreciate you all, you Paige and Chantal, you and Paige.
Awesome, thanks. So Conrad, just give us a rundown of kind of like the main carriers, kind of like some situations that you come across, why you choose a particular carrier in that circumstance, and just, hope everybody will take some notes and remember some of these tips for when they're out in the field, because it is very helpful.
Sure. Yeah. There's a reason that we recommend folks start with 4 carriers, because that'll cover the bulk of the people that we meet with. But I want to back up a second, and it's a little bit off subject. And this part of it, which is what carrier to write when. A lot of times new agents will come in and they think that's what they need to know, that this is the crux. But backing up a little bit, the most important part of our business is buying leads and setting appointments. So that's the bigger part, the 80 to 85% there lumped in there. And then this part right here, well, that's another maybe like 5 to 10%. But what I know a new agent sometimes makes them feel more comfortable to know what to write when. Really, what to write when can be overcome by just calling the agent hotline or looking at your agent guide. You can go to FFL Getting Started, which is an FFL Agent Force website, which will show you a lot of that stuff as far as where you can get agent guides and things like that and walk you through. So I recommend that folks go through all those 6 steps at FFL Getting Started. But yeah, so the 4 carriers that we want to make sure that we're contracted with right away, which will cover most of the people that we're sitting with, are Americo. Of course, they're our number 1 carrier that we've been with since the beginning. They were our first partner. We got Mutual of Omaha, Transamerica, and AIG. So those 4 carriers, you can pretty much write anybody. I love Final Expense, and that's where some of the most challenging clients are in terms of their health situations. Well, it's no surprise that somebody who fills out a form also has some pretty banged up health. But so the way it works for me is really a flow chart of going to Americo first. If it's on the mortgage protection side, we serve mortgage protection leads and final expense leads. We also have EverQuote leads, but mortgage protection leads and final expense leads, I'll just kind of break it down 2 different ways. Okay, so I guess I'll start with the mortgage protection side. And if somebody has pretty clean health, or even if they've got diabetes diagnosed after the age of 30, and basically the application is going to tell you what they qualify for if you read the application. Especially the new Americo Home Mortgage Series term application, it's a knockout for many of the conditions. Basically, the first couple of pages of the application, they're knockout questions. And if you do it the way that is goof-proof, you do an electronic application, it'll tell you when there's a yes answer. It'll tell you that the client's ineligible. But I'm going with HMS 125 and HMS 150, preferably cash back for most of my mortgage protection clients. If they can't fit into Americo's mortgage protection, the HMS, like it gets kicked out, because it'll tell us there. It's automatic underwriting. If it doesn't make it past the prescription check, then there's something in there that they'll probably have to either go to Mutual of Omaha, or more likely they'll have to go to a whole life. If it doesn't pass the HMS prescription check, usually you can try one other carrier, but chances are you'll have to go to a whole life policy. But there are a couple instances where if somebody, let's say, a couple of things that would happen is if somebody were diagnosed with high blood pressure, let's say last month, okay, and it's under control. Let's say they're 40 years old. They got diagnosed with high blood pressure last month. Well, there's a question on the Americo application is, have you been diagnosed with high blood pressure, and has it been under control for at least like 4 months or something like that? Well, if it was diagnosed last month, then it hasn't been under control for 4 months is typically what they're looking for. They don't like new high blood pressure diagnoses. Now, that's a case where I'll go to Mutual of Omaha. Mutual of Omaha doesn't care about how long the blood pressure has been controlled. So, but most of the times, Americo's Home Mortgage Series is going to cover that. And there are one or two instances where you would move to Mutual of Omaha's Term Life Express, and that's one of them. That's the case where somebody just got diagnosed with high blood pressure and they haven't been taking the medicine very long. So, but most of the times we're going with HMS. If they don't pass the prescription check for mortgage protection, or for the Home Mortgage Series 8, which is the HMS 125 or the HMS 150, and it'll tell them right after that consent that they fill out. Americo will do an electronic test of their prescription history. If they get kicked out there, it's a good chance, unless they've really told me something that it seems like it's a mistake, but I'm going to pivot to whole life, and that's generally for somebody age 45 and older, because that's going to be the most liberal underwriting, is age 45 and older for whole life. And so so if you have somebody who's got a $200,000 mortgage, and they're 45 years old, and they get kicked out of Americo's HMS term, I'll start looking at doing $50,000 whole life on Transamerica, which is a whole life policy, and then $40,000 of Mutual of Omaha's Living Promise, a whole life policy. This is $90,000, and then I will write them an Americo HMS with ADB with a $100,000 accidental death rider. So for that person, they've got $100,000 worth of or $90,000 worth of natural death coverage with the Transamerica policy, and the living promise whole life policy, and then I will say to them, you're only 45. Your chances of dying in an accident are a little bit higher because you're commuting this far to work every day, or you've got this dangerous job, and it makes sense for you. Now, this will give you a full mortgage protection coverage. Or I'll say, this $90,000 of coverage will cover about half of the mortgage, or it'll give Jane 8 years worth of mortgage payment protection so that you don't have to quick sell the house. So those are the kinds of pivots that we do, because when we're in a mortgage protection appointment and we're going to be thinking term policy right away, we're going to be thinking term with cash back, and either with Mutual of Omaha or with Americo. If they can't get one of those, then we're looking at critical time period mortgage protection, which is life insurance in an amount less than the full mortgage amount, and it's just the way how we frame it. So if somebody gets kicked out in the house, say, this happens sometimes. It gets kicked, it got kicked out, and then so here's the plan. We're going to move to a different plan. So as long as you make it like it's no big deal, pivoting to a different product in the house is not difficult, but it's how you react to it. So I know this is about underwriting, Chantal, but when an underwriting situation goes a little sideways, then we just react like that's why we work with 18 different companies. I couldn't fit you into this one, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to do $90,000 worth of whole life and $100,000 of accidental death. That way you've got the mortgage completely covered, or $110,000 worth of accidental death. So, but if we say, oh, wow, I couldn't get you covered. Darn, you got declined. They're gonna kind of turn the other direction, because all of a sudden it's, oh my God, it's something that they can't have, and you're making it sound so terrible, and now the hair gets raised on the back of their neck. So just be aware that the more we make things no big deal, the more our clients will agree that it's no big deal. Okay, so that's mortgage protection. Americo, Mutual of Omaha, term products first, preferably with cash back. And if they can't fit into that, then we move into whole life, partial mortgage protection. If the client is under the age of 45, it's a little trickier if they got kicked out of the term policy. Transamerica does have a 0 to 44 whole life policy. That is, somebody from age 0 to 44 can get a policy up to $50,000. So if you can narrow down what that health issue is, or maybe it's a lifestyle issue, maybe it's who knows, maybe it's a felony issue or something like that, you may have to pivot to something else, and it's possible they could get approved in a whole life policy. But if you're sitting with like a 30-year-old and they have a $200,000 mortgage and they get kicked out of the term policy, unless you can fit them into the Transamerica whole life policy, you'll probably be going that HMS with ADB route. And sell the value of, you're more likely to die in an accident than in natural death, and that's just how you frame it. For example, I got a call from an agent in Southeast. Grayson Hughes called me the other day, and he was sitting with somebody who had some significant medical history. There was a suicide attempt prior to this client getting diagnosed with bipolar and schizophrenia. Once this client got treated for it, they were perfectly healthy, functioning person in society. But it was like 20 5 years ago, this instance. So, but, whenever you've got a knockout question like suicide in your history, then you're going to get knocked out of most plans. And, there's a possibility that the client could have got a UL with Global Atlantic. But what I had advised is I said, call the underwriting department on Monday at Global Atlantic, but go ahead and put in place the HMS with ADB. Now, for those of you, I know I mentioned it here a couple of times on the call, it's a $1,000 immediate benefit policy over 30 years. So if somebody's like can get approved for this, let's say that they've got a pretty serious stage 4 cancer, but they're still employed. They're working their everyday job, and they're a good height and weight. They can get approved for this policy. They could really even be terminal. They could even be terminally ill as long as they're working, not disabled, and they fit within the bill chart. They can get approved for this HMS with ADB, $1,000 immediate benefit life insurance, and then an accidental rider up to, I believe, $150,000. And so I suggested that I was on speakerphone, and I said, yeah, and I made very light of it. I said, yeah, you want to do both of them. He said, which one should I do? I said, do both of them, because you want to make sure that this person gets covered. It was a woman, and she rides motorcycles. And I said, you want to make sure that she gets covered, because she's only, I think she might have been 39 years old. She's only 39, and the chances of her dying in all likelihood at this age are from an accident. And I don't know if that's statistically the case, but I mentioned that. And it's funny because the way that she responded, I didn't know that she rode a motorcycle, but the way that she responded was, yeah, that's my main concern is if I get hit, or if I die on my motorcycle. I ride motorcycles all the time, so you never really know. I mean, so here was a way, is just the way that I talked about it sold it. But if I said no, all she can get is that accident policy, that HMS with ADB, she's not going to buy that. So so you're going to be pivoting to that HMS with ADB in addition to whole life if somebody gets kicked out of a term. On the other side, Chantal, there's whole life. We meet with clients for final expense. Now, when a client fills out a final expense form, they're usually in banged up health, and they've managed to make it to age 60, 70, 80, 85 with little or no life insurance. And by now, they probably have got some significant health conditions. So when we meet with them, we're going to be thinking whole life first. Early on, I made this mistake where I would go into a final expense appointment, and I was so excited about the HMS with cash back, and they told me that they didn't take any medications. And I'm thinking, wow, great! And I present this term with cash back on somebody who just wants a funeral expense policy, and I present this term with cash back, and all of a sudden it's out of their budget because they, for whatever reason, let's say they had $30 to spend, and I was new, and I've got a $25,000 cashback term policy at the bottom. My bottom choice is, like, let's say $95, and now I've got to unsell cashback term and go into a lower face amount whole life because I didn't ask enough questions, and they just wanted, let's say, a $10,000. They wanted a $10,000 whole life policy. So when we're meeting, my point is that when we're meeting with clients on final expense, don't overthink it. They're generally they're generally looking for something for their funeral expenses. Does that mean sometimes I'm going to go through my financial inventory and I'm going to find out if they have a mortgage, and sometimes I do turn it into mortgage protection. But really, in a final expense appointment, my point is that we're thinking a whole life. In mortgage protection, we're thinking term before we walk in until we're told otherwise. In final expense, we're thinking whole life until unless there's a very rare instance where you're sitting with somebody who's like a marathon runner on a final expense appointment, and they have a mortgage, and then you can kind of switch the appointment to be a mortgage protection appointment. But for final expense, we're thinking whole life first, and at the top of the list of our whole life is Americo. It's Americo Eagle Premier. That's got a built-in double indemnity accident on top of the natural death policy. So that means at maximum $30,000, you can get $60,000 on an accident, which is car accident, gunshot, falling down the stairs, and I write all those out. And then if they die in a common carrier accident, plane, train, bus, boat, ferry. We live near the border of Michigan and Ontario, Canada, and so there's a river between us. So, and there are a couple of small islands. So I always say, so if the boat ferry capsizes on the way to Harson's Island, then it pays out triple. So I mention these instances to make it real for them. But that's the number one go-to is Americo's Eagle Premier. It's very liberal in its underwriting and its instant electronic decision. For qualification, you read the application. I mean, some of the key things that you would go to that for is if somebody had a heart attack 14 months ago. Well, it has a 12-month look back on heart attack and stroke. Most of the other whole life policies will have a 2-year look back on that kind of stuff. So, it's a very liberal policy. It has a 2-year look back on cancer. We got a lot of carriers that have 3 and 4-year look backs on cancer. So, Americo Eagle Premier is the number one. And by the way, it pays us the best. So we're going to go with that first. And by the way, 8%. So 8% bonus for a 6-month period of $35,000 more production. So why wouldn't you write it? We're getting paid extra to write the carrier that's the best to us. So after that, if they get kicked out, if they get a graded benefit as after the prescription check, then we're going to switch over to Transamerica. There might be a case where we would go to Mutual of Omaha's Living Promise, but chances are if they don't fit into Americo, Eagle Premier, they're not going to fit into Mutual of Omaha Living Promise. But you could probably stack that. We would use Living Promise since Americo goes up to $30,000, Mutual of Omaha's Living Promise is another $40,000. Transamerica, depending on their age, they could add 50, 40, 30, or 25. So you could stack those policies. That's when you would use Mutual of Omaha most of the times. But then after Americo's Eagle Premier, if they get kicked out or offered graded benefit, say, I couldn't fit you into this one, so here's what we're going to do. That's why we work with 18 different companies, because I got to fit for everybody. And so you go through, and you might have to ask a few more underwriting questions so that you can find out why they got declined. It's generally that I haven't done enough digging. And there's some prescription, like one of the questions that we ask is what medications have you ever taken? Or what medications, even if you're not taking them now, have you taken, let's say, in the past 7 years? And that's a good start. And then you can kind of unravel and find out why the client got kicked out of that. But sometimes you can't see it, but you move over to Transamerica. Transamerica is great because in some of the Americo application and a couple of the other Americo products, they don't like it if you're on more than 2 blood pressure medications to control your high blood pressure. So I meet some people who have like 4 and 5 blood pressure medications to control their blood pressure. Transamerica doesn't care about how many blood pressure medications that you take. They also accept conditions like COPD. So something that would knock somebody out of Americo's Eagle Premier would be like a severe COPD type inhaler use in the past. And so we can switch over to Transamerica there. If they have COPD, they will accept them, standard death benefit. They accept kidney disease. So that's like really a go-to. If somebody has kidney disease. Kidney disease is not so easy to ferret out if you're looking at a prescription list. It's often somebody who takes potassium, So when the kidneys are not behaving in like 100% capacity, then I guess there's a loss of potassium. And so you'll see that drug on a prescription list. It might just look like a regular supplement, but you re-ask that question. Have you ever been diagnosed with kidney disease? So really, you can go up to like stage 3 kidney disease. I believe stage 4 and I've seen stage 4 listed mostly as like the end stage, or maybe stage 5 is end stage, but either stage 4 or stage 5, you're on dialysis typically. But stage 3 and lower, somebody can get Transamerica standard death benefit, immediate benefit. There are 2 tiers of pricing on that, Premier and Standard, and it's all based upon whether they answer 0 or 1 questions yes in section, it's either C3 or C4. The application spells it out for you, so read your applications. If after doing that paper application, that Transamerica application is a paper application, that application is probably the only paper application you have to have in your bag, because your Americo policies are going to be e-applications for the HMS and their Eagle Premier. Then your Mutual of Omaha policies, e-applications. Transamerica is a paper application, so make sure you have that application in your bag. If you submit that and you find out they still don't get approved, then you drop back to your client's house, you knock on their door. I never call. I just drop, or if I do call, I say, hey, I got a few more things to go over with your policy. Are you going to be around tomorrow between 10 and 11? Yeah, we'll be here. Okay, great. See you then. Or I'll just drop in on, hey, I got a few more things to go over with your policy. You want me to take my shoes off? Sit down with them, say, I couldn't fit you into this one, and so but I do have this one right here. This is what we're going to do. Use that phraseology. This is what we're going to do, and you fit them into AIG. It's a graded death benefit plan. In the first 2 years, it's kind of like a really good savings plan. If you were to die of natural causes in the first 2 years, it pays out everything that you put in plus 10%. And they'll say, wow, yeah, you can't get that in a bank. No, you can't. And then I say after 2 years, no matter how you die, cancer, stroke, heart attack, diabetes, car accident, whatever, it pays out in full for any kind of death. So again, I'm talking about it excitedly, never talking about the decline or you couldn't get this. It's, I couldn't fit you into this, but that's why we work with so many different companies. Here's what we're going to do. Couldn't get you fit into this? We work with a whole bunch of different companies. This happens all the time. Here's what we're going to do. So those 4 companies, you should be able to fit everybody into it. Mortgage, you're thinking term. They can't get into Americo's term. There might be 1 or 2 other cases, like let's say, for example, somebody had a felony committed, I don't know, like 4 years ago. You might go to a company called CFG. They're a little bit more liberal on felonies. But really, it's going to be Americo term. And if they can't fit into that, you're going to be moving into whole life with Americo. If they don't fit into whole life with Americo, Transamerica whole life. If they get kicked out of Transamerica whole life, then you're going to go to AIG. On the final expense side, you're going to be thinking whole life first, so it's Americo Eagle Premier. After that, Transamerica. If you need to stack policies, you'll add on Mutual of Omaha, Living Promise, and then after that, AIG. So does that make sense, Chantal? I know it's easier to see a flow chart of that visually, but hopefully I was able to convey that underwriting flow for folks.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense, Conrad. Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to help us. I'm sure that helped a lot of people get the flow of how we choose and why.
You're welcome, Chantal, and I thank you for having me on. And if anybody has any questions or wants to reach out to me directly on an underwriting question, my cell number is 313-587-4625.
All right. Thank you so much, Conrad. And everybody make it a great week. You've got the weekend coming up. Use your time wisely. End of month is coming up. Hope you guys are hitting your 90-day challenge markers. That'll probably be something we'll be following up in the next week or two. So everybody make it a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, Chantal.